Yeah, sure. Once again, hello everyone. I'm Niti Dubey. I would like to welcome all of you on behalf of Mukunda Foods. Today we are here to discuss everything about Cloud Kitchen and how to run a profitable one. We have prominent speakers with us, so allow me to introduce each one of them. Our first speaker for the day is Mr. Gautam Balijapalli, who is a London Business School alumni, and he is an ex-Solar personal. And Gautam has already invested in many startups, or rather successful ones. Gautam's latest venture is Cuisina Tech Food, because today Cuisina houses some of the very renowned cloud kitchens, that's like Warm Oven, Slurpee Shakes, and Kathi Zone, and many more. Our second speaker for the day is Mr. Mohammad Bol. Mohammad is a seasoned chef, and he has worked under international chef Gordon Ramsay. And Mohammad is famous for his biryani expertise, and he has got his gourmet food recipes in the world of Cloud Kitchen with Charcoalies that he co-founded with our third speaker, Mr. Krishnakant Thakur. Krishnakant, I guess he would be joining us in a few minutes. I'll introduce him once he joins us. Before that, I would like to introduce our next speaker, Mr. Ishwar K. Vikas, who is CEO
I think he's
and
already.
co-founder.
He's already in. KK is already there. I think he's under a different Steam name, but I can see him.
Okay, great. I'm sorry, KK, if you are already in. So give me honor to introduce Krishnakant. Krishnakant is an IIM Bangalore alumni, and he is a serial entrepreneur. Krishnakant has experience of setting up processes for businesses starting from investment firm to cloud kitchen. He and Mohammad collaboratively co-founded Charcoalies. So our last speaker and host for the session is Mr. Ishwar K. Vikas, CEO and co-founder for Mukunda Foods. Mukunda Foods is a kitchen automation solution provider, and right now it has solutions for starting from Indian gravies, parathas, dosas, and fried food items. And we are currently serving for across 3,000 plus kitchens. So before I hand over it to Ishwar for the next segment, a few things I would like to request you, or rather suggest you, to run this session smoothly. We have already received quite a good number of questions regarding the session, and that's kind of encouraging for us. So we will be taking all those questions towards the end of the session. So the session will be around 75 minutes to 90 minutes session. And if you have any further questions, I request everyone to drop us a message on the chat box. There is a account named Mukunda Foods. Do drop your questions. We'll note all of them, and we will be taking them towards the end of the session. So once again, welcome to everyone. Over to you, Isha.
Great. Hi. So thanks all for joining. I can see all of you. Great. Thanks for joining. So at Mukunda Foods, well, we automate a lot of kitchen processes, automations, working with a lot of large and small brands. I think one of the key questions we always keep getting is, we keep getting the question again and again is, are cloud kitchens profitable? How to make a cloud kitchen profitable? Is it something that, that would really fly? And, when we were speaking to a lot of people starting up new as well as large brands that are getting into cloud kitchen for the first time, this has always been a question, is cloud kitchens a bubble? Is it profitable? Is it really worth putting all the time, energy in cloud kitchens? That's when we thought we'll be having a session about cloud kitchens today, where we speak about, everything from profitability, what's happening, what's not happening, and all that stuff. So thanks for joining. Just a quick house announcement. I think Rupali, Iti's screen is pinned. You might want to unpin it so that automatically the spotlight comes on the speaker. Great. So thanks. So we have a fantastic panel. Thanks, Gautam, KK, and Mohammad, Chef Mohammad, for joining today. I think the first question for me would be, first thing, just want to understand from you, Gautam. You have been a VC. You have, worked with large corporate companies. You have worked with Ola. You have funded a lot of successful startups as a VC. And right now you are working, you have started in the cloud kitchen space. Can you just drop some light on why you chose cloud kitchens? And of course there are huge opportunities for somebody like you, and why would you get into the cloud kitchen space?
Sure. First of all, thank you for having me here. Look forward to the discussion in the next 1 hour. Look, I think for us, it has been a journey of discovery and accident. We started this in 2013 as a side project, which I think you are familiar with and perhaps KK is aware of. And over time, I think the business grew to a size that it started to become hard to manage as a side project. And of course, by that time, food delivery had become big. Overall, the industry is fairly large. So it got us excited to focus on this as a full-time entrepreneurial venture, right? I can go back and tell you that, look, hey, this is a very big opportunity, and we did some whiteboarding and identified an opportunity, but that's not the reality. The reality is we started this as a side project, we meaning few of us as co-founders. We were moonlighting at that point in time, and over a course of 5 years, which was our first, let's say, phase of our evolution, the business in itself had become fairly sizable in Bangalore, that we got really excited that it can become a national level play, right? And if I just take a step back and reflect upon how or why we decided to do that, I think this was towards the end of 2018 or early part of 2019. By then, food delivery had become large enough in the country. Most of us, including people on this particular, discussion or otherwise, had become fairly active users of Swiggy, Zomato, or any other app of that form. However, I think in a country like India, which has got a lot of people, more and more people moving into the middle class, upper middle class, I think there exists very few brands in the overall restaurant ecosystem, right? And that is fundamentally what excited us, because there's an opportunity to create multiple such brands across the country, right? So that's in essence been our journey. Of course, yeah, so that's how we've come
Great.
to where we are.
Thanks, Gautam. So, Chef Mohammad Bhol, we keep big fan of your biryani. We really love your biryani. So you have worked for real large chefs and large establishments in the past. You have been a gourmet chef, worked with Gordon Ramsay. And how does it, like, why did you take the jump to come into a cloud kitchen and start a biryani brand there? And just take us through that thought process of years going, like a chef like you. We see somebody like you being an executive chef of a very large hotel and doing very gourmet specific Michelin star foods, and from there to a cloud kitchen. Like, wanted to know your thoughts behind it, and why did you take that leap?
So, I think one thing was very clear, and I'll just take a step back. I think my family business has been catering. I'm a Bori. My family business in 4-5 decades has been the Bori Thal. Okay. We're very popular in a very small community that we have in Mumbai among the Boris for the biryani. But again, as a caterer or as somebody who does or provides food for events, you're just as good as the last event you've done. I think the motivation was how do we build Indian food, which is really, really popular, and there was nobody who had done it in a scalable way. Honestly, with me, like Gautam said, the many things that happened by accident, and discovery. Everything that whatever we've built today is not something that we planned or to. I think the best thing that happened is you learn along the way and do it. My claim to fame, as you can see, and as like you rightly said, I was in a very limited, myopic chef mindset, where we used to get very excited about doing these dishes and but I mean, at the end of the day, it does not really add up. It does not add to scale. So,
Sure.
you know, on a lighter note, I think my claim to fame can be, you know, convince people like KK to join and, you know, really help because I was very good on the food side and, you know, how to basically figured a lot of things on how to basically scale on the product side. But let's be very, very honest. It's not just the food and product. That is a very, very, very small part. And I think that's where somebody like KK comes in, who basically joins many, many things together to make this business successful. On the face of it, you think it's food, which is again very, very true. Food is important. I'm not discounting that for even 1 second. But let me tell you, it is the most important thing. But then again, at the same time, I'll contradict myself by saying that it is only 5 or 10% of the entire thing. So, you know, it's a dichotomy of sorts. I know I'm contradicting myself over here, but that's how we learned. And, you know, that has been my learning in a nutshell in the last 5 years.
Got it. Great. Thanks, Shak. Now, Krishnakant, we fondly call him KK. You're an investor who writes checks and you fund a lot of companies. And you're spending most of your time, as Mohammed said, in your Charcoal Eats brand. And quick few words on, you know, why do you focus on food cloud kitchens and what does that mean to the whole system here?
Sure. Am I audible?
Yeah, you are audible. Perfect.
Okay. Unlike Mohammed, as he said, that he brings expertise on the food side, whereas I can say about Gautam, we kind of share a common background, which is more on the financial services side. So what excited us was you have the big players like the McDonald's and the Domino's of the world. However, if you look at in terms of the consumption categories, there is obviously biryani as well as many Indian food categories which are available. However, what intrigued us from the financial services side also was there is not a single player on the Indian food canvas side, which you can call it as a listed company, which is there in terms of the stock markets, where investor can actually, or these are the barometers basically for the Indian food consumption. There was not a single food company like that. On the other hand, also you have the global brands which have scaled up. We failed to understand that why the Indian food companies were not able to scale up. Honestly, that was one of the reasons that we also got into this segment. Our initial vision was, can we make Domino's of biryani? Domino's coming from the fact that it has to be scalable, it has to be consistent, because the brand like the Domino's has obviously achieved that. Bringing in the Indian food side, and obviously biryani was the default choice because of the expertise that Mohammed brings in, as well as it is one of the largest consumption categories. So this was clearly the reason, Ishwar, to get into the food business. Having got into that, there have been obviously many learnings because the business looks very lucrative from outside. Yes, it is, but there are inherent challenges as well. And as Gautam said, and Mohammed also pointed out that it was not cloud kitchen from day one. We also have experimented with a couple of models. And yes, given the current situation, cloud kitchen looks like to be a sustainable, scalable business model.
Great. So I think these are the tips and tricks, you know, we are all here to learn on, you know, from KK, Chef and, you know, Gautam, that can we stop screen share? I think somebody has shared their screen. Great, sorry. Great. So thanks for joining. And we will be dividing the session into 2 parts. As the session is how, you know, what is the path to profitability, or how do we make a cloud kitchen profitability? As we all know, there are 2 ways of making a profit. You know, one is on the revenue side, another is increasing your revenue, and the second is decreasing your cost. So we'll be spending the first, say, 20-30 minutes on how do we increase revenue at a cloud kitchen. And after that, the second half will be on how do we decrease costs. And you have been amongst the 3 of you, you've spent over a decade in the cloud kitchen, the food space, and, you know, been numerous conversations with you, and you've figured out a way how to get unit economics right, how to make a kitchen profitable. And to start with you, Gautam, you know, on the revenue side, you know, what are the levers to increase revenue? You know, there are multiple levers. there are ways you can have a kitchen, have multiple brands. I can see a lot of brands you have written. You have Cartizone, you have Warm Oven, you have acquired Cartizone, and your shakes, your burger brands. One way is to increase brands. The second way is to increase the number of menu items. The third way is to open more kitchens in more cities. And can you just run us through what are the levers and what is an ideal way you see that, to increase revenue at a cloud kitchen?
Sure. With the caveat that we are also still discovering some of these things, we don't yet have a magic wand or an answer. But yes, I think with 7-8 years of experience, having been in this part of industry, I think we definitely have a lot more answers than most other people, right? So, I mean, look, the way I look at it is that there are broadly about 2 or 3 dimensions to increasing revenue, right? If you take us and how we started, we had a single brand and single kitchen, right? At that point in time, the only 2 dimensions for increasing your revenues is either increase the order volume or increase the value per order, average order value, right? Fortunately, back then when we started in a very high AOV category, which was cakes. So some of these challenges were less important, if you may, right? So that's one dimension, right? Then the second dimension is, from the same kitchen, can you now add other categories and other brands, right? So within a brand, number of orders, increasing the AOV, increase the number of brands in the same kitchen. So this is one way to start growing on the revenue front. Now, the other dimension to it is that this is a very large market, like KK, Mohammed have alluded to. Right? I think across the country, people would like to consume food. We just getting started in this industry in India. So you also have you can also increase revenues by increasing the number of kitchens. Right? So broadly, how can you increase revenues from the same kitchen, which is by increasing the orders, increasing the average order value, and then increasing the number of brands in the same kitchen. And then once you have comfort on all of those dimensions, start expanding into newer locations, newer kitchens. So this is the way we've done it. This is the way we've grown it. I mean, for the first 4.5, 5 years of our existence, it was largely only one brand, which was Warm Oven, which is a cake and dessert brand. We sold through multiple channels, and sometime in 2018, 2019, we started expanding into other brands and other categories, and then subsequently started expanding the number of kitchens. So at a very high level, this is probably the framework that we have applied to increasing the revenues. We can get into the details of how to do each of these things, but maybe at a later point.
So I think that would be my second question, but I'll come back to you in a while. But before that, Gautam, I had this question, right? One of the ways in which Cousina is expanding is through adding more franchisees, one of the routes. But I also hear that you don't give franchisee a lot. You're very choosy in the locations, the number of people. You should be a gifted person to get your franchisee. Any quick thought on that? Like, why is that?
Look, I think as part of our expansion, we are being a little choosy for sure, because I think we want to make the right choice of partner. Right, that's the first reason for being choosy. I think more than the kind of people, the background of the person, I think what we are being very choosy about is the location. Where do you set up the kitchen? Because obviously we built this business using a lot of data. Right. While it is not a pure play restaurant business with a main street presence, etc., to some extent, where do you set up the kitchen has a bearing on how your performance is going to be in the subsequent months or years to come. Right. So we are definitely being very choosy about the locations that we are going to set up with. And of course, I think in addition to that, obviously we want to be particular about the kind of people that we're signing up with.
So when you say location, what would be the key elements of a location?
Sure.
What is the most important thing, and how do you arrive at that?
No, so I think it's a fairly data-driven approach that we have. So it's largely top-down, which is what's the demand in a city. In a city, what are the micro markets where there's a lot of demand for food delivery in general and for the categories in which we are operating specifically. And then subsequently within that micro market, and micro market is basically for people from Bangalore, it is equivalent of a Koramangala or Indiranagar. If anybody is there from Pune, it is similar to a Kothurud, or people from Mumbai, it is like a Powai. It is basically an area on the map. Sure. Within that, so what is the level of demand in the city? What is the demand in the micro market? What is the demand for the specific categories in which we are operating? And then comes the question of where do you choose the location within that particular micro market? So we look at data at all of these levels, and and use that to make a choice on where to set up the location. So that's the approach that we have taken. I mean, that's what we've done for the kitchens that we've set up ourselves in Bangalore, Hyderabad, or Pune. But as we are expanding through other partners, we're essentially using the same approach.
Got it. Thanks, Gautam. Now, my next question would be to Charcoal. You have a different approach for scale. You are more of a heads down, focusing on one or two large categories, and your go-to mantra for increasing revenue is a different thing. Would you like to throw a little light on how has been your approach to increasing your revenue, and how is it going for you right now at Charcoal? KK or Mohammed, both of you, anybody can be comfortable to take this question.
Sure, I'll take this issue.
Sure.
So increasing the revenue and making the business profitable, as Gautam pointed out, that obviously one of the ways is that you keep on adding brands. That is obviously a good strategy because you keep on sweating your existing assets.
Yeah.
Right. Our focus has been that what typically happens is, if you look at, and it's again a very top-down kind of an approach, it has to start from the product. What exactly is your product? Whether it's a biryani, whether it's a burger, you are selling shakes. What kind of a market would be responsive to that kind of a product? Very data-driven approach. If I tell you about Bombay specific, it looks like a huge market for biryani. However, only there are top 5 zones in the Bombay city, which contributes 80% of the biryani sale. Right? Now, practically, if someone doesn't know this kind of a data, he will be setting up cloud kitchen at any place and might be disappointed later that the response is not that great. Right? So you also need to be aware of the micro markets. You also need to be aware of what are the kind of product that you are selling.
Right.
Post that, again, as Gautam pointed out, that location becomes very important. And I would just like to add a dimension to it, that why this becomes also very critical is that your focus is on delivery. On cloud kitchens, you hardly get any marketing space in terms of the billboards or in terms of the signage.
Right.
So you are practically dependent upon only delivery, either through Zomato, Swiggy, or your own deliveries. And now, considering the habituation of the customers, practically you can easily assume that 90-95% of the business will come through your inorganic channel, which is Zomato and Swiggy.
Okay.
Now, when you are competing in that kind of a space, in that kind of an app, and there are many customers, there are many brands which are there, your individual operational metrics also becomes very, very important. I won't go into the each and every detail as of now, but one of the important metrics for the consumer is your delivery time. Now, the moment your outlet is visible and it shows 50 minutes delivery time versus someone else's 30-minute delivery time, the customer is obviously going to gravitate towards the 30 minutes delivery time.
Right.
And that is where, despite your cloud kitchen, the location becomes very, very important. So you know what is the kind of concentration you are catering in the minimum time frame.
Okay.
Right. So that obviously becomes very, very key for optimizing the revenue at a particular outlet. Yes, our approach has been go after one particular category because we think biryani is a huge category. We are not so distant number 2 player in biryani in Bombay. And the idea is that how soon I can catch up to become number 1 player in this category in Bombay market. That is what we are going after. And therein, the idea is that I have to work very, very closely with Zomato and Swiggy. Right? Because 90% of the business is coming through that. So understanding their app dynamics, understanding how the demand is shaping through their app, what are the kind of different avenues which are available through their apps, all these things plays very, very important role. So the idea is that you keep on optimizing revenue at a particular store, work closely with Zomato, Swiggy. There are other levers as well, as Gautam pointed out, keep on increasing the AOV, right? AOV is basically order per customer or an APC matrix, because your financial parameters will actually play a lot many important role depending upon your AOV, because your discounts also come in through Zomato and Swiggy app, your commissions also come in. That is where for your profitability, I know I'm jumping the gun, but increasing the revenue and for your profitability, AOV becomes very, very important.
Got it. So, KK, you've been telling about data, right? That data is critical on which city, what is the micro market, how many people eat biryani there, what is average price. Is there a way that people could access this data on, or how would you do that? Is it publicly available, or is it, there with the aggregators, or is it something that is you figured out after a lot of work? And how do you look at that data?
So a lot of it is secondary, I would say, Ishwar. A lot of this data is available on the aggregators app. Now, let's say for an example of a low apparel market or a Powai market in Bombay, you can easily go to each and every restaurant, look at the listings in that market. There is also a metric wherein they show that what is the cost for two or cost of one for the consumer to order from, whether it is 200 rupees, 300 rupees. So you also know that what is the kind of concentration that this market has. Right? If you see a lot of brands playing in the region of, let's say 200 to 250 rupees, which is the cost for one. And if your product fits into a segment, which is 400 to 450 rupees or 500 rupees, which is cost for one. So you actually need to think through for that market, whether that micro market is actually right market for you.
Got it.
So all these data are anyways available through the aggregators app. And once you are listed with these guys, obviously there is a lot of knowledge sharing, which also happens through these aggregators.
Got it. So the next question I have again for you, KK, is how do you or KK or Mohammed, any of you, right? How do you really launch a new brand? You have been there, done that. Relaunched it in a couple of cities, and you're also, I hear, for your new IPL, you're launching new roles and wraps and stuff like that. How does that work, and how do I? Because I'm not in a prime real estate. I know you have done some billboards and stuff like that in Mumbai, but in general, if a normal cloud kitchen were to increase their revenue through these small apps, what are the tricks there up there?
Sure. Maybe I'll go first because you can see a lot of those logos in my background already. So look, I mean, in our case, I think some of that was through an acquisition. I mean, one of the logos that you see is a brand called Carty Zone, which was a very popular offline retail brand, especially in Bangalore, which we acquired, and then we rolled it out as a delivery only brand from our existing cloud kitchens, right? But if I take a step back, I think generally what we have done is that, like KK was mentioning, first step is that we looked at how much can we sweat the existing assets, whether it's largely the equipment and the investment that I've already made into the kitchen. I have a certain space, and I have certain capabilities in terms of people, etc. So using that as an input, and of course, assuming that the market opportunity is large enough, right? The demand is large enough. We then do a small trial in one or two locations. And once the customer feedback has been pretty good in these few locations, then we tend to roll it out across the network of kitchens, right? So if you look at the portfolio that is displayed on the screen, so we have a whole lot of brands which have started as an extension of Warm Oven, right? A cupcake brand, which is called Cupcake Bliss, a thick shake brand called Slurpee Shakes, because some of these brands use the same approach as a Warm Oven. Right? But we started when there is enough sizable market opportunity. And then as long as we don't need to add any additional investment or capabilities in the kitchen, we tend to expand it. Of course, Carty Zone was a more inorganic way of doing it, which was more opportunistic. But again, there we felt that the brand itself had was naturally extending to our capabilities. And then they had a whole set of processes SOPs. There was a whole lot of maturity in the way that brand was operating, that it made ample sense for us to integrate it into our kitchen network. Right? I mean, come back to that maturity of the process, etc., at a later point. But this is the way we've approached extension or expansion into other brands.
Sure.
Fundamentally, I think obviously the category has to be large enough to justify any effort or investment or attention from the team.
Got it. So once you identify, okay, this is a micro market, this is the cuisine, this is the category, this is the thing. How do you go about generating your first 10, 20 orders a day? And how does your first 1 month look like? Do you lose money in the first 1 month? What is the wise thing to do? And next month, next brand, what would be a approach, say next brand when you launch?
Look, I mean, the honest reality of any business is if you don't invest, the business won't grow, right? So assuming that the day on which you start, there'll be 100 people who are waiting to order from you and you will make money on day one is a big fallacy. That is not the truth. You have to invest unless like Mohammed is able to bring Gordon Ramsay and help us eat biryani at very low prices. That is not going to happen. But in general, I think you will have to invest for a while, maybe a month or a month and a half, right? Our philosophy has been that at a unit level, which is if I sell a milkshake, do I make money on that milkshake after taking out all my variable costs, right? Is the first question to answer. And do I do it with great customer reviews and feedback is the second question to answer, which means that there's a large market. I'm able to make money at an individual order level and customers are liking my product. If that happens, then we expand into other locations. And of course, for the first 1 month, 2 months, you have to build awareness in any micro market. Nobody knows whether you exist there in that market or not, right? So we do a whole bunch of inorganic and organic ways of boosting revenue in the location. Organic being we obviously work very closely with the Swiggy's and Zomatos of the world to make sure that there are enough entry points into our menu. If you open up a Swiggy or Zomato app, there are so many ways in which a customer can reach a menu, right? Now, it's basic hygiene, but you need to make sure that all of these entry points lead to your menu, right? It's not, it requires a lot of discipline and process, both from our side as well as from their side, because part of this is still done in a very manual way, right? So firstly, we make sure that the menu hygiene is taken care of, which is basically, are the customers able to come to the menu through the various entry points that exist on these apps? Number one. When they come to the menu, do I have the right kind of descriptions? Do I have the right kind of images? Because like they say, you eat visually sometimes. So all of the or rather you eat with your 5 senses. Mohammed probably can help us understand that better. But in the food delivery world, the only sense, basically you're looking at the images. So making sure of those images becomes important. Once we have done that, I think we obviously do some ops checks, etc., in a location to make sure that everything is working fine. And after a certain point, we start to do certain inorganic ways of boosting revenue, which is we either do some discounting in that market or we do variety of ads on these platforms, CPC, video ads, etc. But fundamentally, the gist of the message is that when you launch, you will have to build the awareness in that micro market, because till you become a brand, consumer is not aware of you. So till that point in time, every time you launch in a micro market, you need to have some sort of a playbook for increasing the awareness in that market. After a point, basically the demand starts to pick up on its own.
Got it. So this, I think, next question would be to Mohammed, leading on to what you said, Gautam. Once you do the launch, you do organic stuff, basic hygiene on Swiggy, Zomato, then look at doing CPC, display ads, and other inorganic ways. And say, people have come, eaten your food. And so this is for Chef Mohammed. How would you know that this is a good food, and how do we know that this is a good food and you're creating repeat orders? What are some things that people ought to be doing in their kitchens to increase their repeat orders? Because it's not always good to always throw discounts, and with good food, people definitely come back to eat it. So how do you go about doing that and increase? You have a lot of repeat orders, we know that. So how do you do that?
So I think, as KK mentioned earlier, once you're listed on the platform with Swiggy and Zomato, I think one benefit is that there is a lot of data that is available. You as a brand need to know what exactly you're looking at. From a product point of view, I think it is very, very important to understand that anything new that you start, you have to give it at least 60 days, in my opinion, at least 90 days, before you can start making sense of the entire process, whether it's working or not. Because when we say product, taste is just one part of it. The whole experience counts. And also at the same time, as KK mentioned earlier, you will also get a lot of feedback on whether that product at that price point is making sense or not. Because see, a product is good is very, very relative. I mean, it's good at maybe a 300 rupees. But the moment it's 450 rupees, it's not that good. So, it's a process across 2 and 3 months. And after 3 months, I think what happens is it's very important that you can get feedback from these aggregators. They give you feedback on how many people have come to the platform, to try the product, how many have stuck onto it, what is the repeat percentage. There are a lot of data points that are available. And also there is a rating system, that is available. So usually they're very cagey about sharing a lot of information. I think it all depends on the level of involvement that you have with them, and how much you are also investing in the brand along with them, where you convince them that, look, share this with me on a real-time basis. The more you share this information with me, the better I can crank up and improve my system, and so on and so forth. And you have to do this on a day-to-day basis. So it's a challenge, because just understand from their point of view also, ethically, they also not very okay sharing competitor information or sharing benchmarks. I think all these things sort out when you start building scale, and when they also see that, the products that you're selling on the platform, people are liking it and they're coming back.
Got it. So any thoughts there, KK? I think before we move on to the cost structure, just wanted to know anything else that you would suggest aspiring brands and new brands that they could do to increase their repeat orders.
Sure. So I'll just extend your question, where you also talked about that how do you keep on adding brands/products, right? Now that becomes very, very difficult. I think from the food side, it would be easier for Mohammed, because he would be able to objectively tell that this is a good food or a good product to launch. However, what comes into play is that when you are also kind of playing in a certain canvas, right? Now, when we launched Charcoal Eats, the idea was that Indian food is our canvas. Now, under Indian food, there are still host of products, right, that we can still do it. In terms of capability, I don't doubt that the food team doesn't have the capability. They can launch it in like 3 days. However, does it still fit in? Right? Because you also need to look at what is the kind of overall customer communication I'm saying. Where do I fit in consumer's mind? Now, I'm selling from biryani to sandwich to pizzas. It doesn't cut in, right? So that is where it also becomes very important to say no, that I will not be launching this product, right? I mean, it would be very lucrative. Your gaps are still there. The market is huge enough. But still, you have to be very, very clear and in terms of choosy that what exactly is your product profile looks like. To give you an example, and then extending this, the way we also launch few of our products is that we also don't want to burden our existing infrastructure, right? So the idea is that there are certain equipment that we already have at the stores. Within those constraints, within those equipments, and if there is a need from the consumer side, does it make sense to launch a new product? So the classic example I'll give you is that when we launched biryani as well as starters, because that looks like a normal extension, along with the starters, during the snacking time, there was practically a gap in the menu. right? Which could easily be filled by, let's say, rolls and wraps. Now, obviously, wraps again will not fit in because of the Indian consumer canvas, Indian food canvas point of view. But yes, rolls do fit in. So what we did was we actually took an extensive feedback from the existing customers as well as from the aggregators that does these two go hand in hand. Now, having identified the market that there is a gap, there are not many competitors, rolls is a good market to get in. Then we also try and look at in that what is the kind of backending capability that we need. Now, from our perspective, the way we kind of optimize is that there are already certain products which are there as starters. The idea is that at minimal intervention, can I convert these starters basically into roles? Having considered whatever taste point and price point that the consumer want. So that is how you keep on extending your products. You also keep on looking at your existing equipments. If I need to put in an investment of another 1.5 lakhs just to launch rolls, then suddenly the idea doesn't sound very lucrative.
Right.
Right. So all these things go hand in hand. What is the kind of communication? What is the kind of branding you are having? There is also a possibility that you add a product and it completely confuses the consumer.
Right.
And your entire funnel on the aggregator also goes for a toss.
Right.
So the idea is that you be very, very choosy that what exactly you stand for, and then you go for the product extension, keeping your fixed cost and your operation cost in check.
Got it. I think this is very helpful, KK, where you say, say no, that is the better way to grow rather than do everything which is not there in your brand. You say no to things which you don't stand for as a brand and only add stuff which is clear to you, and that would something, as you said, would grow your brand. So now, any closing thoughts on this, Gautam, before we go to the next session?
No, sure. I think, look, I think one of the advantages of a cloud kitchen model as compared to a traditional restaurant is that while you can, while you're not in front of the consumer or there is no dine-in facility, because you are operating a kitchen which is connected to the cloud, right, which is online, you can launch a number of brands from the same kitchen, right? While yes, in the same brand, you should ensure that the brand is communicating consistently to the consumer and not create too much of confusion in the consumer's mind. The other side of the same coin is that it creates an opportunity to launch multiple brands from the same kitchen or infrastructure, as long as you have the capabilities to do that, right? So, I mean, in some sense, cloud kitchen is as much an internet business as it is a food business, right? I think your ability to launch these brands on online platforms, drive demand through various digital tools, etc., gives you an advantage in this model as compared to a more conventional restaurant model, right? But fundamentally, I do agree with what KK said, which is if you're running a single brand, the brand should stand for something in the consumer's mind. And given that online ordering is a relatively lower friction process, it's best not to confuse the consumer with too many identities. However, from a business model perspective, the advantage is you have a kitchen, you don't have a restaurant. More often than not, the consumer doesn't know where the kitchen is. So you can launch a lot of brands from the same kitchen, which is exactly what we have done. If you go to Warm Oven, the brand stands for cakes and desserts and it stays true to its identity. But the moment we wanted to do burgers or rolls, we launched into other brands.
Got it. Thanks, Gautam. I think this is the first session for us about discussing on increasing revenue. Before we go on to the next session, where we are talking more on how do you reduce costs, how do you, I think making money today is more on reducing costs. That's a very interesting topic to discuss. Before going there, we have two new products which we have launched as Mukunda Foods in the automation. We thought no food, unfortunately, because of a Zoom call, but visually we will show some of the videos here, 2 to 3 minutes, and then we would jump back into our session to discuss about costs. Can you play the video, Rupali or Preeti? Thanks.
Yes.
Walkie is an automated cooking station. It is electricity-based machine, single phase. It takes 5 kilowatt of power. You can make rice, noodles, starters, gravies, pastas with using this machine. Here, heat and your tossing is automated based on whatever recipes we have automated in this machine. At one go, you can make up to 5 portions of any recipe. Uh, as you can see on the right side of the screen, what to add, how much to add, and at what time the ingredient needs to be added is guided by the assisted cooking technology. If you look at the attachments here, the different kind of attachment actually enabling you to make the noodles in a proper way. So this was Walkie for you. And now we are presenting our new automated fryer, Eco Fryer. Again, this is an electricity-based fryer having 8-liter capacity, single phase. Here we have a lot of time one faces problem around over frying and under frying. So here we are solving that problem based on your recipe, which is your time setting and temperature setting. Your food would be automatically dipped and lifted out of oil. You can set your own menu at your own location. For each menu, you can go up to 5 portions. Food will automatically get dipped when the temperature is reached and will get out when the timing is done. This also has double dip technology, wherein you can get far better crispness, color for the food you are frying. Again, timing and temperatures can be set as per your own recipe. As you see, the crispiness and the color is perfect with the double dip mode. We also have a hood variant wherein you can fry food now in a AC room and still the fumes and the odor will not come out. This fryer has a sleep mode and deep sleep mode, which actually saves your energy consumption and your operation expenses come down.
Great. Thanks, Rupali. I think Walkie and EPAN can help add a couple of more brands to all of you. Great. Coming back to our session about reducing costs. Maybe KK, you could discuss about, wanted to know what are the cost structures that, what are those baskets that are there in a cloud kitchen? How is it different from a QSR? And what are the top things we need to keep in mind when, structuring a cloud kitchen? What baskets we should consider, what we should not consider? And how does the whole math work? Maybe at a 10,000 feet level, if you could share that, it will be very good.
Sure. So predominantly, if you look at the basic difference between the cost structure, let's say of a restaurant versus the biggest difference which comes in obviously on two folds. One is the rentals as well as the electricity and the power consumption, right? Having said that, if you broadly look at the cost structure for a restaurant model per se, whether it's a restaurant, QSR, or a cloud kitchen, honestly, I would say, Ishwar, that there are very, very limited scope of reducing the cost point of view. And the reason being because it's a very fine line, because you also have to maintain that kind of a quality. what typically happens from a business side as well as from the food side, there will obviously be a tussle that the business side will obviously want to have as high gross margins as possible. Whereas there is a lot of constraint on the food side that if you want a particular product at a particular quality, this is what you have to pay. Now, these are the internal challenges because customer would obviously want the best. The customer would definitely want the best quality as well as at a reasonable price point. Now, that is where, if you look at in terms of cloud kitchen, so let me break down the entire cost structure. So one is the gross margin, and the operating costs here are your food, paper, as well as logistics cost. Right? Typically, if you look at the food cost, even for the large brands, it ranges from 25% for Domino's to as high as 34-35% for McDonald's. I would say anywhere for a smaller brand, anywhere between 35 to 40% is a reasonable number to start with. I would say ultimately you will have to go back to a 30 to 35% food cost kind of number. Your paper packaging is I would say a spoil sport, because you have to invest. The customer will just throw it away. But for your brand perception as well as for your differentiation, you obviously will have to invest in paper and packaging. Typically, it can go as high as 5.5 to 6%. And with COVID also in play, there are a lot of other layers which also gets added to packaging. You have a product packaging, you have outer packaging, then you have a brown paper bag as well. Then you have other stuffs also for the hygiene part. So your paper packaging could itself be around 5.5 to 6%. Logistics, depending upon what kind of a backending you have, it could be anywhere between 2 to 2.5%. So on an average, if you look at practically to start with, 50% would be your gross margin. Your 50% would be your food, paper, and logistics cost itself, right? And then you will have your dark kitchens, rentals, salaries, as well as electricity. Now, if I break down these 6 components in terms of cost saving, I would say you have a typical fixed cost components, which is your rent as well as your salary. You obviously cannot go down much below on that, right? You cannot compromise on your people. You cannot compromise on the number of hours that they work, because then you will get into the attrition problem. So obviously the levers which are available for you are food, paper, as well as I would say the power consumption. So food, paper, yes, the food team keeps on working at it. That you also need to hedge in terms of what to procure at a spot price, what to procure at a long-term contracts. What are the various combinations and permutation combination you need to keep on exploring to keep on reducing the food cost. This is the region, I would say, wherein a lot of backending processes as well as automation comes into play. Because again, I would say that even on the food cost, there is a limited scope to reduce the price. An X material will cost you 100 rupees a kg. It might cost you 95, 96 rupees a kg. You cannot go below that, right? However, working on the automation and the processes side, if you are able to increase your overall yields of the product, right, that typically can easily give you 15 to 20% kind of a savings. So that is on your food, your paper and packaging. Obviously, there's a lot of technology which is now also coming into the play. You need to keep on working and keep on reducing the paper packaging cost. And then finally, I would say is the power consumption, which you have just shown 5 minutes back. That this is one of the ways that practically it solves 2 problems. So one is the consistency is the bigger problem in the food industry. It absolutely solves that, as well as it helps in reduction of the power consumption.
Right. Thanks, Kiki. I think this is really helpful, on what should be the gross margins, what should be the food price. Gautam, what are your thoughts on reducing? How do you reduce costs in your business, and what would be the best way to do that?
I think we've been a little bit more fortunate in some sense because Domino's, KK took the example of Domino's, right, where the food costs are very, very low. That is because Domino's has already become a very, very large brand, and their food cost as a percentage of how much the consumer is willing to pay is at 24%, right? And I think that's the right way to look at it, because is the consumer willing to pay more is the question to ask here, as much as it is about how much cost will you reduce, because there's only so much you can reduce on the cost side, right? In our case, I think we've been fortunate enough that we operate in a category where one of our major brands is Warm Oven, which is in the category of cakes and desserts. So if any of you, have a birthday in your household, you want a great cake, great looking cake, great tasting cake, coming home at the right time and wowing all the guests and have a great birthday, right? Whether you pay 800 rupees or 700 rupees, I am very sure that most people wouldn't really blink an eyelid to pay 100 rupees more for a great experience. So for us, that has been, we've in some sense, in very MBA-ish terms, we've had that pricing power, if you may, because of the category in which we operate, right? And of course, we back it up with a fantastic product, a fantastic customer experience. And we also end up over investing a little bit on packaging, because we want to make sure that the customer gets a great cake when he orders it, right? So that way, I think the cost structure related pressures have been, we've been fortunate enough. But to answer your question, I think like KK said, one is with, as you become bigger and bigger, naturally there will be advantages in reducing the cost, because you are buying more from your vendors, right? That's one step in reduction of the process. Second, which I've already alluded to, which is basically as you start to become a bigger and bigger brand, again, your cost structures become more attractive as compared to how much the customer is paid, right? The third thing which we have kind of seen is that we've been fairly diligent in measuring wastage, right? Either through the choice of the way we operate our kitchens, or even through a set of processes. I mean, in general, in this industry, the wastage is also fairly high. I think could be anywhere from 5 to 10% if people are actually measuring it, right? So that's clear. That's the low hanging fruit, right? I think almost every restaurant food business has wastage. If you're able to track it more carefully and improve on it, that will reduce the cost. But otherwise, I think there is, and then of course, there is some level of automation, which you can do for sure, right? I think through making the people more efficient and making the kitchen more efficient, right? So improving the productivity of the people, either through better training or better processes, and eventually having some level of automation would help reduce the fixed costs in the kitchen. On the variable cost side, I think one of the, in our case at least, choice of category has helped us, because we were able to price it better. Food and packaging costs, I think with scale, our costs have come down. But beyond that, honestly, I don't see too many levers for reducing it, because the moment you start to reduce it, it will have a bearing on the product quality, and it will start to question your fundamental existence itself, right? Wastage, better training, better processes, and eventually some level of automation is where in the kitchens we've been able to reduce the costs.
Got it. Thanks, Gautam. I think wastage is something people really don't look at as a key element. And as you said, to start tracking wastage itself, you might, start realizing 2 to 3% of efficiencies month on month there. So, Mohammed, like what backending should be a good way to look? Is backending a good approach? What kind of backending is something that is good, and what needs to be done to reduce costs there? And what are the ways we could brands would usually create some efficiencies in that sense?
So I think when you say backending, it's a little complicated than that, because firstly, when somebody's putting in a cloud kitchen as a brand, it only makes sense to get into backending and work with players who are deep into backending, who've been in the business. And the first thing they ask you is, what is the scale? Because for backending to work from a partnership model, it is very, very, very important for them to give only make sense for you if you have multiple stores. Now it's fairly complicated for a cloud kitchen brand who's just basically starting out because the problem is going to be, will you find a vendor, will you find a manufacturing partner to support you, or should you do it on your own? It's been 5 years we've been in this business, and I can fairly tell you very, very confidently that this is one area that there's a lot of work that is still pending, especially on the Indian food side. With the attention of detail that is required on the product that is needed to have sustainable revenue in each of these micro markets and make you successful in the city. Our approach has been that we have our own central kitchen. We've experimented a lot, and we realized that having control on the product quality, and also more than the control on the product quality, I think it is very important, because KK works in KK has got very, very deep insights in marketing and on a real-time basis. So with backending, I think one of the most important thing is that you need flexibility. Like, to a week into or 2 weeks into, KK comes with some insight that, guys, this is feedback on the product, what we can do. Now, at that point, if you don't have the flexibility to make those changes, or change a little composition on the product to better serve the consumers, it becomes very, 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 very challenging. And so that's been our experience. We've worked with many, many partners, but I think what we've settled on is having control on your own product. Central kitchen, we do milk runs across the city. We make food freshly, and we supply them in a chilled format.
Great. Thanks, Mohammed. I think the next question, which during our registrations, we got a lot of questions. Okay, how do you tackle with attrition? Which is something quite high in this industry, is what I believe. Who would like to discuss about that? I think I would like to keep this sort of open. Gautam or KK, Mohammed, whoever wants to take a dig at it.
I will take a stab at it. And I'm sure KK and Mohammed will have their own points of view. Look, I mean, that's the reality of most businesses. I mean, this industry is no different. If you go to folks in the IT industry or BPO industry, attrition is fairly high there as well, right? I think in a growing economy with more and more opportunities, I think attrition will always be a challenge, right? Fundamentally, that's the truth that we'll all have to live with, right? In this industry, obviously, it's a little bit more pronounced, because you're dealing with a different kind of employee, right? I think at least in our case, what we have done, and I don't think we have a magic wand for this attrition problem, but what we've attempted to do is, see, fundamentally, with no offense to all the restaurateurs who are on this chat or otherwise, fundamentally, employees in this industry have never been treated well. Number one, they don't get paid on time, right? Coming from our corporate kind of backgrounds, I think these are basically hygiene factors for us to run an organization. So we treat them like we would treat any other employee. Treat them like humans. We're nice to them, right? Which is not, I mean, I'm making it sound as if it's a big thing, but that is not how restaurants and kitchens operate, right? And secondly, we make sure they're paid on time, right? Thirdly, I think we also kind of train them and try to show them a career path, saying that, look, you start here as a helper or a committee or whatever you call it, and in 6 months, if you do well, this is where you go, and look, the company has grown and you will go somewhere else in 5-6 years. So basically just educate them that, look, this is something which will secure your life for the long term, right? I think this is the, let's say, the positive discipline side of how do we deal with attrition. I mean, we still have relatively high attrition, but I think if I compare it with industry benchmarks, I think it's still a respectable number, considering that we're still a very young company, and we've done that level of comparison with some of the large players who have excellent HR practices. The other dimension of it is that, which where I think somebody like Mukunda would come in the long term, is that yes, in an industry where some level of training and skill is required and attrition is actually a problem, I think if we can automate some of these things, it becomes easier, right? The third dimension of it is that yes, there is attrition. I think, like you alluded to in the previous question, how much of work can be back-ended, right? Can you reduce the dependency of the on the person in the cloud kitchen, right? So in our case, unlike what Mohammed is saying, in our case, basically for our non-desert brands, we work on a frozen supply chain model. We do not have a central kitchen, but we work with probably some of the best food processors or manufacturers for that. So based broadly three ways. One, obviously, take a very human perspective on the people, make sure they get paid, etc. On time. Deal with them like you would with any other employee. Automation, and then also have a business model where the dependency on the person in the skill level of the person in the last mile is minimized.
Sure, got it. I think we are sort of running out of time before I have the last question, and then we open for Q&A. I believe we have got a good number of questions. This is for KK. I think this is something which we again got a lot of queries prior to the webinar. Is how do you negotiate better with delivery partners? What's the tip there? What's the trick there? Is it possible?
When you say delivery partners, Ishwar, you mean the aggregators?
Yeah, sorry, the aggregators, and
Okay.
also if you want your own delivery system, if there is.
Sure. See, unlike, or I would say, as compared to your other cost parameters, this also will come in play with your economies of scale. As you become from a city brand to a national brand, then even at these points, your economies of scale will start coming in, wherein you can have a meaningful conversation with the aggregators that this is not what the kind of discount that I want to run in. This is not what kind of commission that I'll be able to pay, because then my entire business becomes unprofitable, unviable, right? However, having said that, there are still limitations. To give you an example, let's say one of the aggregators, if it charges me, or if the level, I can still be at, let's say, 95 or 96 rupees. However, having an expectation that maybe I'll come down to 75 or 80, it's not going to happen. Fortunately or unfortunately, we will have to deal with it in the industry, because as it's an oligopolistic industry, right? So you have the last two players, which are Zomato and Swiggy. And the volumes keep on increasing. Now, obviously, these guys also will turn their way into profitability.
Right.
So, however, it's a meaningful conversation. I wouldn't say that the conversations are not heard, or the negotiations doesn't bear fruit. But yes, at a scale, particular scale, you can also have your ways wherein you can be different. You can your constructs and your structure can be different from what the app is giving. To give you an example, let's say the app is currently running 50% off up to rupees 100. As a brand, you can decide, you can take a call that I don't want to run it. It all depends upon what is the kind of demand shaping which is happening, what is the kind of revenues that you want, and what is the kind of profitability that you are eyeing for.
Got it. So I would like to flip this question to Gautam, because he was at Food Panda before, and he was, I think, both sides of the table. So what's your take here, Gautam?
No, look, I think fundamentally what KK mentioned applies, which is on every one of the costs, either with the delivery aggregators or otherwise. As you become bigger and bigger, scale gives you the advantage, because they have as much need for you as you have their need, right? I think I mean, in our case, for example, we've from one city, now we've expanded to about 10 cities, 40, 50 locations, etc. So, I mean, we are a national level strategic account, which means that they are going to pay a lot more attention to us, right? They'll hear us out a lot more, etc. And during that process of engagement, definitely we also want to reduce the delivery costs. And like KK says, they are always open to hear you out, right? So it is oligopolistic. Yes, there are two players. Fortunately for some of us in Bangalore, we're still waiting for Amazon to drive up demand here. We've been working with them closely, but I think that's going to be a pivotal moment in the industry. Not only will the cost structures change, but also will the floodgates for demand open, right? And I think every single day I wake up and hope that Amazon is announcing something big. It has not yet happened, but I think like with everything with Amazon, they will time it perfectly, right? So I'm very, very optimistic about that, right? So that's the second point. The third point is that I think fundamentally you have to understand their business model as well, right? The average cost of delivery for a Swiggy or a Zomato across the country, I mean, is around 60 rupees, right? Each delivery costs them about 60 rupees, right? This is ballpark, right? It can be a little this side or that side, depending on the city or micro market. And they take an average of 20% in commission from most restaurants. So unless your average order value is greater than 300 rupees, they will not be making money on the delivery, right? I mean, this is all, they bring the order and they will also deliver the order to the consumer. It costs them 60 rupees. So therefore, I think it always becomes more and more important to operate either in categories with high AOV or ensure your average order value is going up, because at which point in time you will start to become a very important partner or account for them. If you are not making money for them, obviously there's only so much time anybody can run a loss-making business. So the hard questions will be asked. So I think that's the other key, let's say, insight that I have coming from the other side. Right?
Got it. So thanks, guys. I think we will jump into questions. There have been 15, 20 questions. So it will be more like a rapid fire, and whoever three of you feel can take a go at it. The first question is from Shreyas Darne. He says, do the speakers feel that investor community has become skeptical about cloud kitchens? What is your take on that?
I would say, Ishwar, it is contrary. I would say, given the food tech and the interest and the investment on the food tech side, I think there is a reasonable way which is there. So rather than being skeptic, people are positive on this segment.
Got it. Thanks.
No, I think having been on both sides, I would tend to agree. And if you actually look at what's happening globally, I think there's a lot of money that's being invested into this category. And these trends and patterns move across markets, right? These are large secular trends, right? People ordering food at home is something that is unstoppable, right? I mean, I think a few days ago, I was reading that in China, since the pandemic, close to 400 million people have ordered food at home, right? And that's, I don't know the exact Chinese population, etc., but that's still a very large number for me, right? So these trends are unstoppable, right? And I mean, just digressing a little bit, unfortunately, what has also happened because of the pandemic in a country like ours is that a lot of offline restaurants have been impacted, right? So here you have like an interesting market where you have Swiggy's and Zomato's who've raised a lot of money. Obviously, they have to grow. You have a whole bunch of consumers who are bored of eating their own food at home and waiting to order food from outside. Definitely, they may not go and dine in at restaurants. And on the other hand, you also have a lot of restaurants who have suffered because of the lockdowns and lack of consumers. So who's going to fulfill all this demand, right? And that is where cloud kitchens or people like us would come in. And that gives me supreme confidence that the investors will really double down on this category like they've done in other markets. It's only a matter of time.
Got it. Thanks. Next question is for Mohammed. There's a question. Somebody said, is it profitable and a good idea to make European delicacies in India in a cloud kitchen format?
So I think it's a very oddball. It's a very niche segment, because when you talk about European delicacies, you're talking about pre-plated food. And, pre-plated food is more on how the one rosette Michelin star food is, where you have your starch, your main protein, and your vegetables and all of that. I had seen a few concepts earlier, but I don't think that is scalable, at least not in the Indian context of the market. You can have it in an area, like probably in South Bombay, there could be one kitchen which could do that and make a case. But from a scale point of view, it seems very challenging to me.
Got it. Thanks, Mohammed. Next question from Tushar Goyal. He says, is it very easy to start and maintain a brand using Swiggy, Zomato? by doing continuously CPC and CPV? Is that the reason why many companies are making same cuisine brand, but one premium, one not? Anybody would like to take that question? I think it's on, is it easy to start and continue to do more brands on Swiggy and Zomato? Is it easy to do that, is the question.
No, look, I mean, I'll take that, and perhaps KK and Mohammed can chime in. See, fundamentally, whether it's a cloud kitchen or not, I think this industry has had very low barriers to start or enter, right? So yes, you can start and you can now do CPVs, so you can start multiple brands, right? But the real question is that how sustainable is it, how scalable is it, and how profitable will it pick up, right? So that is where I think, like I said earlier, understanding these platforms, ability to get business through various digital marketing ways, CPV, CPC is just one such method. Understanding the cost structures, having a certain operating model, all of these things start to come into play, right? In our case, I think, yes, we have started brands, but we have I mean, over years, we have a defined playbook saying that when we launch a brand in a market, there's so much of discount we'll do, there's so much of CPCs we do. After 2 or 3 months, we will reduce it. After 6 months, it will come down further, so on and so forth. So I mean, if I kind of take a slightly controversial viewpoint, the narrative about cloud kitchens has always been about cost structures, ability to set it up in second floor, third floors of buildings, etc. But that the restaurant business. What is missing is how do you scale up business? How do you generate demand on a sustainable basis? I think that is where the whole business crux of the business model here lies.
Got it. I think there is one question for KK which says, can we set up kitchens, cloud kitchens from residential areas? Yeah, I think you're on mute. Rupali, can you unmute KK, please? Yeah, he's back. So the question is, can we set up cloud kitchens in residential areas? Okay. Residential, from homes, basically. Somebody, I think that's what they meant. Can I open a cloud kitchen from my home?
Okay. Unfortunately, no, Ishwar, because there are obviously, so the licensing, etc. for a cloud kitchen is relatively simple. However, there are still certain guidelines in terms of the area, which has to be more than 200 square feet. Using gas, you practically also need to have a exit door. If you're not using gas, then you practically need to have a single window licenses, etc., etc. So these has to be the commercial premises. The licensing, etc., is easy, but however, you need to get all those things. You need to comply with all those things.
Got it. Thanks. Iti, are there other questions? I can see a few from chat. I think. Is there any you can continue? I think there are a lot of questions, but
there are many questions, Isha. I'll start making one by one. So they are asking typically what is the cost of delivery incurred by the aggregator per order. I guess maybe KK can help us with the answer for this.
Yeah, sure, Iti. So from an aggregator's point of view, depending upon the scale you are in, depending upon the AOV, which is the average value per order, it can range anywhere from 20% to 25%, excluding tax. So obviously these will be different commercials, but yeah, these are the ballpark numbers on a per order basis.
Okay. Another question from Shreyash is, do these speakers feel that the investors community has
I think
become
we finished
skeptical?
that question.
Yeah. So, sorry. The other one is almost all major companies do not showcase to customers that all brands belong to same company. Is this, or what's the reason behind it? Maybe Gautam would like to take up this question.
No, I think we do have a branding at a corporate level, which is called Cousina. So all of our brands, the products are dispatched in a Cousina bag, if you may, right? But each individual brand has its own branding. So while people start with the assumption that each of them are different brands, I think at some point in time you would want to pull them together, because that's the advantage of the model, right? If somebody has had a great experience from a warm oven cake, I want them to know that cortisone also comes from the same company, right? So while the starting point, when you are a little unsure of your processes, your product, etc., it may make sense to have these as independent brands. I think as you mature, it makes a lot of sense to bring all of them together, right?
Got it. This is a very interesting question. I think I want to ask this. Raghav says, what best needs to be done to retain customers, as customers are always searching for something new? How do we stay connected and continue to charm them? I think that's the question.
I mean, let me take a stab at it. I think that's again not true. Like I think Mohammed was mentioning earlier, right? I think we do get a lot of data from the channel partners, which is Swiggy and Zomato. I think fundamentally food is competitive. Customer is always looking for options. But if your product is good, I think people don't want to experiment too much, right? I think there's a limited consideration set for any category or any particular cuisine that the consumer looks at. I think if you think of how we consumed food in offline world much before all these delivery aggregators, etc., that's what happens. If you like food in a certain place in the nearby area, you will go back to that place again and again, right? So while all this digital marketing and Swiggy and Zomato will help you acquire customers, it's ultimately the product and the quality of the product which will ensure that you are able to retain customers, right? So I think at least in our case, because we do have heavy emphasis on the product and the customer experience, we do get a lot of repeat rates.
Got it. There's a push. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, just so Rajiv is asking, what's an idea volume of orders per square feet to set the cloud kitchen asset optimally? So I mean, maybe Gautam or Krishna can take it up, this question. What's an ideal volume of orders per square feet for to work cloud kitchens optimally?
No, I mean, again, number of orders is not necessarily the right metric, because the average order value becomes a very important thing. Because while at this, I mean, this is important from a profitability of a kitchen, right? So if you are able to do less orders, but high average order value and high gross margin, etc., that becomes a much more stress-free kitchen to run, if you may, right? So I think in our case, I think typically we tend to break even around 50 to 75 orders in a location. And the more cakes that are added into the mix, the easier that target starts to become. Again, that number can vary depending on category, the kind of pricing, the kind of margin structures you may have.
Yeah. Gautam, Anshu has a question specifically for you, and he asked that how do you decide on the food brand you want to market? How do you get to know that this one will work for you?
No, I think a priori nobody knows what is going to work for you, right? I think we start with the assumption that there is demand in a certain category, right? That is informed by various sources, like KK was mentioning earlier. There's a lot of information that you can get out of Swiggy, Zomato, which is publicly available. And in our particular case, I think we are fortunate enough to have scaled to a certain level where we get a lot more insights from them, right? So that's the starting point. Then we decide on the menu, the product, which our culinary team figures out, and then we launch it in 1 or 2 locations. Once it reaches a certain threshold in terms of order volume and customer rating, that is when we will start investing into growing the brand. So this is how we look at it. I hope that answers the question.
Thanks. Isha, there's a question for you, I guess. Ramesh is asking, are these products commercially viable, and specifically fryer and wok and something? Yeah.
Oh yeah, so most of the products we have automated Chinese rotis, flatbreads, dosas, and all those things. They're very viable in terms of the cost structures because, for example, a fryer which we have, the smart fryer reduces 30% of your electricity and 25% oil consumption. So which is close to 200 to 250 rupees a day, and over a month you are saving 7,000 to 10,000 rupees. And the cost of the fryer you will be able to recover in about 3 to 4 months. Similarly, in Woki, when you're doing Chinese, Indian curries and all that stuff, which can make about 1,000 recipes, you'll be able to save a lot of time and energy and manpower cost with all these machines. And I think more than talking about, I think it's the best way to visit mukundafoods.com and see all the products and download our cost benefit analysis, or send an email to sales@mukundafoods.com, and Rajiv would get all the details there.
Yeah, I guess you answered the next question also, which was for you. How do they get to know about these products? So yeah, I guess KK might want to answer this question. Sonia wants to know if if it's a good idea to go for their own delivery fleet, and does it help in basically increasing your brand recall value?
Okay. Based on the data, I can say that as of now, it looks like that it will not be a good idea. The reason being, or to jump straight to the answer, let me also break it down. If you have your own deliveries, which is basically you have your own employees, and then you want to do the own deliveries because you want to optimize a lot many things in terms of cost structure also, it will not be a great idea, because then you are practically adding a fixed cost to your P&L. And what unfortunately also happens is that the food deliveries are basically at a certain peak levels. So you will see a peak during lunchtime, and then you will see a peak during evening time, dinner time. And at that point of time, you will not be able to optimize your food delivery to your own manpower. In that case, based on our relatively small experience, your cost can even work out to like 100 and 150 rupees per order, which makes it completely unviable. The reason also is that customers are habituated to order through Zomato and Swiggy because of the convenience, because of the ease, maybe because of the discounts, maybe because of the options that there are. So in that sense, it doesn't make sense to have your own manpower and do the deliveries. However, you definitely you can easily get the tie-ins, tie-ups done, which basically through Dunzos and Shadowfax and other third-party deliveries, you should definitely get the delivery tie-ups done.
Got it. I think in interest of time, I think we should close the Q&A, and we could have the closing remarks. So it has been a good 90-minute session. Thanks guys for, I know it's a busy time, and with the whole COVID coming back, I'm sure, you need to get your supply chains back in place. You need to, pack things for a rainy day, maybe tomorrow. But any closing thoughts on, say, if I'm starting a cloud kitchen or planning, what would be your 2 lines of advice? Let's start with, say, Mohammed. What would be your 2 lines of advice?
I think if he's a chef, my first advice is find somebody like a KK before jumping into it. I think my feedback is that a lot of people want to get into it, and there is a saying that every person once in their life will brush their way with food in one form or the other, big or small. And usually, the idea of jumping into food business comes when you go to a crowded restaurant or you're standing in a queue for something. And that's where you have this aha moment that, oh shit, look at this guy, he's minting millions and I should be doing this. Okay. That is one part of people who jump in. The other part are excited, chefs like me who come back from abroad, or, who just had this traveling aha moment where, they've seen something fantastic and they come and they see that, we should be doing this as of yesterday. Why are we not into it? Let me tell you, the reality is far, far different from it. Okay. You might be a very good cook. You might be making fantastic food, but making it in a in a small trial kitchen at your home, having friends and family or even 100 people testing it is one thing. Making a business out of it, that is completely something else. So, I think that would be my only this thing. Find somebody who understands numbers. Let me tell you, including myself, no shame in saying 90% of chefs really don't understand how numbers work. And I think it is very important to find a colleague, a co-founder, a partner who understands this before jumping into it. I mean, that's out of my experience. I could be completely wrong.
Or the other way, if you're a numbers guy, find somebody like Mohammed, find a good chef. Yeah, great. Gautam, what do you? Yeah,
Without product, there is no business, right? So what numbers will you churn when you don't have the product?
Great. So what are your closing thoughts, KK?
My two bits, Ishwar, would be that this is precisely the reason that we are also into this business, that the opportunity is huge, right? Like other segments also, there will be a time that there will be many multi-billion-dollar companies even in this space. Food being one of the largest consumption stories in a country like us. However, kind of Mohammed summarized it, that the nitty-gritties has to be looked at, right? The opportunities are huge, but yes, the challenges are also there. The challenges are galore. Your competitions are there. You also need to understand how Zomato's and Swiggy's work. You need to understand their profitability, work with them closely. You also need to spend a lot of money. We haven't spoken on that, but you also need to spend a lot of money in your brand building, because that is where your customer stickiness and your customer repeat also comes in. Once you have a good product, you still have to be as a top of the mind recall for the customer, because customer can easily switch off, right? So you also need to spend a lot on your ATLs. You need to do a lot of print campaigns and digital campaigns. Your ATL budgets has to be there. So you have to be for the long haul. So that would be my two-bit issue. That it's not that an easy business, but yes, you have to be at it. You have to be at the long haul.
Got it. So we really hope charcoal becomes $1 billion business someday, not far from now. Gautam, what are your closing thoughts?
No, look, I think I echo the sentiments of my fellow panelists. It's a big opportunity for sure. There is absolutely no doubt about it. But it's a hard business to run every day. You have to be you have to make sure that you churn out great products every single day. Every single customer matters. You have to make sure your people are happy, because there's a huge dependency on the people and the chef. You know, make sure you're procuring raw materials, etc., at the right time. You have to make sure you have the right presence on all the digital platforms. So there's a whole gamut of things that you have to make sure you get it right, and you have to do it every single day, right? Because customer in this category, fortunately or unfortunately, has other choices as well, right? So that's while the opportunity is big, it is also equally challenging or hard to run it, right? If you think about how people have scaled in the food business when they had their brush with food, like Mohammed was referring, globally, I think there have been books written about people who become successful Subway franchisees or McDonald's franchisees in North America, right? We've not seen that wave take off in a big way, right? And that is the insight that we are kind of bringing to table, saying that, look, we've done it ourselves. We've started with one kitchen, one brand for the first 4 or 5 years, knew how to build it profitably. Then we went into the second phase, which is add more brands, expand into other cities, which tested our ability to launch new brands, tested our ability to manage or work with people across different cities, our supply chain. Now comes this third phase for us, which is we are basically working on this partner-driven model, right? So I think bit of a sales pitch, but it's a big opportunity, but a hard one to execute. So if anybody is interested, I think sign up with us, or if KK and team want to have partners helping them, I think that's a much easier way to becoming successful in this industry, because we made all the mistakes in the last 7-8 years, so you can learn from all that wisdom, right? I think I would basically recommend that as a path to entering into the cloud kitchen business, because you also get a lot of leverage with the aggregators by the time you get to this kind of scale.
Got it. Thanks, Gautam. And they normally say running a startup is a marathon, but running a food startup is a double marathon. Huge respect for you guys running it day in and day out. Such a tough place to be in, and sitting here with smiling faces keeps people like us exciting to be working with people like you. And thanks for joining the panel, and thanks for all the people who have been a participant here. I hope we were able to add value to you. Thank you and stay safe. Bye.
Thank you for having us. Bye.
Thank
Bye,
you.
Gautam. Bye. Bye, guys.
Bye, guys.